Welcome to the Virtual Strategic Solutions Virtual Reality Simulation System. Accessing Legacy Dataset. Files loaded, simulation ready. A fortified settlement built on the site of a pre-war tourist attraction, Foundation is the main base of the settlers, a group of people that came from Pittsburgh under the leadership of Page, in the hope that it would offer some reprieve from the horrors in the north. Upon their arrival and subsequent discovery of Spruce Knob, they repurposed the existing buildings, cleared the surrounding trees, and Foundation was formed. Ever since, Foundation has been a haven for other settlers in Appalachia, and an eyesore for the raiders at the crater. Foundation's power comes from its main fusion generator. Much of Foundation is built on wooden logs, obtained thanks to the settlement's own mill saw at the Builder's Nest. The town contains several buildings, including a barracks, boarding house, and a variety of stores ran by the Sunnies. The Spruce Knob observation deck is located in its center. There are two instanced interior locations, Founders Hall and Foundation Supply Room. When Minerva visits Foundation to sell her discounted wares, her tent will be placed along the eastern side of the main road, between the main gate and the fast travel destination. Her Brahmin Minos will be found on the western side of the main road. Page is the de facto leader of the settlers living at Foundation in Appalachia, while not the sole leader of Foundation, and Page does not refer to himself as their leader, and views himself as merely being in charge of construction. He is said to be the closest member they have resembling a main leader. His leaderly role has resulted in much of the settlement's success. Right after the Great War, Page and other survivors took the last train out of Union Station in Washington, D.C. As they left the capital, they saw the toxic green air lingering above the city. Page and his group eventually reached the ruins of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, where they would stay until it became too dangerous, and they had to leave. Led by Page, a large group of settlers went south, arriving in Appalachia and setting up the settlement known as Foundation at Spruce Knob. Jen was born after the Great War. Her parents had a complicated relationship, both former Chinese spies who fell in love despite it being forbidden. Despite her heritage, she has lived in America for her entire life, mostly in the capital wasteland. About 11 years ago, when she was a teenager, her mother Mochu mysteriously disappeared, leaving her and her father alone. Assuming she was dead, the two moved on. However, a year later during winter, her father thought he might have a chance to reunite with Mocho after hearing a radio signal, but it turned out to be a raider trap and he was killed. Jen buried him in his stealth suit because she was unable to remove it. Jen also began to forget her mother's face and what she looked like. In 2103, Jen arrived at Appalachia from the capital wasteland. She soon met up with Page and his group of settlers, somewhere north of Spruce Knob. Since then, she has fallen in with the residents at Foundation, working mostly as a scout for the settlement. She is also pulling her weight as a talented electrical engineer, familiar with all sorts of high-end, especially Chinese technology, but does not give that away for fear of how Great War survivors might react. However, she is not adept at hacking and usually collaborates with other people when working on robots. She and the Foundation settlers were planning to pick apart one of the air purifiers in the ash heap in order to make them work again. Jen is good friends with Samuel, who occasionally joins her on scavenging hunts. Since Penelope Hornwright's arrival, Jen and the doctor have become friends and colleagues. Jen states Penny is very smart and will teach her loads of fun things involving tech. The two have also been working on the Liberator that the Vault Dwellers brought them. Jen is hoping to turn it into a soothing personal assistant and has named it Rico. Jen has also befriended the dog Private Lucky, with whom she occasionally cuddles. However, she does not get along with Oliver Fields and Fred Radcliffe. A medical practitioner with over 30 years of experience, Aubrey Willem is one of the co-founders of Foundation and its primary medical doctor. Prior to the Great War, he lived in Pennsylvania and worked as a medical practitioner. He was asked by Page to set up an observation camp nearby. He was the only survivor of a scorched attack and fled to a secluded cave. Depending on the player's actions, he will either return to Foundation to inform Page of the reality of the scorched plague, or remain in quarantine eventually leading him to commit suicide. If convinced to return to Foundation, he can be found in his office and will thank the player for telling him there is a vaccine to the scorched plague, so he wouldn't have to quarantine himself to protect the rest of the settlers from becoming infected themselves. Derek was born and raised in Pittsburgh, stating his roots go back to at least 4 or 5 generations. After the Great War, the city fell on the hands of raiders, taking many civilians as slaves, including Derek, who worked at rebuilding the city for their enslavers. At some point, he met a raider enforcer by the name Elsie. Both shared their distaste at their jobs and eventually fell in love. They wanted to leave, and after having a child, Davy, as a result of an unintentional pregnancy, they orchestrated an escape. Derek hates guns, but that day Elsie made him use one, though he never hit anything he aimed at. They managed to escape, and during the next years, Derek and his family always kept moving, never staying on the same spot for more than a week. Elsie considered that was not the way to raise a child, but all that finally changed when they arrived at Foundation. Ever since settling in Foundation, Derek has had much work as a carpenter and constructor. He and Elsie are highly protective of their son Davy, as he is one of the first of the post-war generation. Derek has little to say of Pittsburgh, other than that Appalachia is leagues above the former city. If questioned about his past in the pit, Derek prefers not to talk about it, advising vault dwellers not to go north, ever. Samuel arrived at Foundation sometime in 2103. Elsie Taylor notes he is one of the settlement's newer citizens. He claims that he is from a vault similar to that of the Vault 76 dwellers, noting its location is far away and well hidden, insisting that those inquiring would not have heard of it, and that he does not even know how to get back to it. Samuel mentions that he misses living there, but is likewise glad to be free of tests subjected upon him. However, the apparel that he wears is from Vault Tech University. Samuel is light-hearted and enjoys playing Nuka Tapper, although expresses his frustration at losing his saved games. He is also an avid lyricist, though some residents try to avoid being an audience to it. Samuel attempts to use regional words such as yins, hoagies, and jawn, though he expresses confusion with the terms and says he cannot keep up, referring to the different dialects that are found in Foundation's diverse populace. At Foundation, while Ward is still trying to figure out what he's best at, Samuel mostly works on whatever is needed. At the moment, though, he is fairly occupied with repairs and scavenging. After the Vault 79 heist, Ward assigns him as Foundation's gold bullion trader. He is also good friends with Jen, who occasionally joins in scavenging hunts. He also states that she has a style he can respect. It is implied that Samuel has a romantic interest in her, though it is never shown whether or not she shares this interest. A reformed raider who joined Foundation after parting ways with the raiders, Ward initially hid his past from the settlers, ashamed and afraid of being ostracized. His life changed when he discovered an old self-help manual, Be Better Than Your Worst Self, by Bryce J. Hart. Although just one volume of 30, at a pre-war price of $999 per copy, it changed his life for the better. He revealed his past to the rest of Foundation, risking exile or worse. Instead, they have forgiven him and allowed him to continue his reform. Since then, he has continued practicing the steps outlined by J. Hart, taking a daily inventory of ways he improved over his yesterday self and being ever mindful of the ability to improve. He even had, "I'm better than this," tattooed in an unobtrusive place. Although he formally answers to Page, Ward is in charge of the day-to-day operations of Foundation. He will issue commands to people, and many people follow them without question because of his selfless attitude. This is to the extent that people look to Ward for guidance, and he may be considered a de facto leader of Foundation, along with Page. When the Vault 76 Vault Dwellers arrive at Foundation, Ward is looking for vital equipment that has gone missing and will ask for their help. Maggie was born and raised in Monongah by her father Earl, with her mother, a suspected chem addict, leaving the family early on. She gave her father a pocket watch with "Love You Pops Mags" engraved on it. The watch had a photograph of Maggie and her father inside, and he always kept it with him. After her father and some of his miner colleagues got trapped inside Monongah Mine, Due to Deke Sykes blowing up the entrance in January 2076, she tried to gain entry to the mine to search for her father, but was unsuccessful due to too much rubble being in the way. She was told by the workers that her father was somewhere else, although she did not entirely believe them and suspected the workers were paid by Hornwright Industrial to keep silent, or the company didn't want to deal with the expenses of a rescue mission. With no one offering to help her clear the rubble, just to make sure anyway, Maggie clawed at the rubble until her hands bled, but she was forced to be escorted away, and all she could do was hope that the workers were being truthful. 2.5 decades later, Maggie resides in Foundation and wishes to find closure on her father. She accepts that her father must be dead from either starvation or radiation, although hopes he did not suffer in his final moments.